Chapter 1 of Betty Baird. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Holly Jensen. Betty Baird by Anna Hamlin Weikel. Published in 1906. Chapter 1. Betty Hears the Great News. I have such a lovely new book. Oh, have you, Betty? What is it? Asked Edith. Why, Rose Reeves of Belle Haven, replied Betty with enthusiasm. A boarding school book? Asked Edith eagerly. Betty's affirmative nod was triumphant. Oh, goody! Let me have it when you are done with it. Of course. Edith, wouldn't it be just grand if we could go to boarding school? Wouldn't it? Agreed Edith enthusiastically. But I sometimes fear I'll never get to one, continued Betty mournfully. I suppose I'll have to be like Miss Jane and go out sewing for a living. Oh, you goose! Imagine your ever being like dear old Miss Jane. And Edith laughed hilariously at Betty's lugubrious countenance. What in the world are you laughing so about? Asked a third girl who had just approached. Oh, Ada, what do you think? Exclaimed Edith excitedly, neglecting to answer the question. Betty has a new boarding school book out of the Sunday school library. Well, you two are the craziest things about boarding school I ever saw. You don't ever expect to go to one, do you? You wouldn't know how to act if you did, Ada informed them mockingly. I should, replied Betty firmly. I should know exactly how to act in every circumstance. I have learned all about it in 4 years at Lakeside and good times at Irvington. Oh, you have, said Ada sarcastically. Well, you'll never get there anyhow, and you might as well make up your mind to that first as last. With which cheering piece of advice she walked off. Quoth the raven, nevermore, croaked Betty, looking after her disgustedly, and the two friends sitting on the wisteria-covered porch of the old manse, their heads close together, were soon absorbed in their new find. The same evening, Betty, the daughter of Dr. Baird, the Presbyterian minister of the village of Weston, was walking to church with her mother, when her father, who had been stalking gloomily a little in advance, painfully engrossed with his evening sermon, turned suddenly, saying, Elizabeth, come into my study after the service. Betty had just passed her 14th birthday. She was small for her age. A mass of tow-colored hair, with a promising glint of gold in it, framed the soft oval of a winsome face, lighted up by dark glowing eyes. Her mouth in repose may have had classical shape, but as she was an incessant talker, this was problematic. Dressed in simple dimity, and wearing a jaunty white sailor hat with an aggressive-looking red quill stuck in the band, she was a picture which drew many pleased, friendly glances. She was leaning confidingly close to her mother, with her slim, sun-browned hands locked affectionately over her arm, and was talking with her accustomed impetuosity, the whimsical curves of her mouth indicating that the subject was humorous. At her father's abrupt words, she stopped her chattering and looked up at her mother, squeezing her arm questioningly. "What's up now?" she whispered uneasily. But as they were about to enter the church, she received no answer, except a look which told her to wait. During the quiet service she felt like a culprit. To her excited imagination there was an added awfulness in her father's voice, and a distinct flame in his severe black eyes. Every word was a menace. "But what have I done?" was the insistent question in her mind. She went searchingly over the day, but not one transgression could she uncover, unless, was it possible that after all these years her father had, in the morning service, seen her eat those 3 pink peppermints which Mr. Jones had given her? Ever since she could remember, it had been Mr. Jones' custom to push stealthily along the seat, with plump freckled hands, 3, always 3, pink peppermints. Today he made his customary offering while they were singing "How tedious and tasteless the hour," and she had wondered if the solemn little man had meant to perpetrate a sly joke. She considered Mr. Jones a perfectly delightful old gentleman, with his red wig, stubby gray whiskers, and big steel-bowed spectacles. His preternaturally solemn blue eyes, peering out of his sandy face, itself not unlike a pink peppermint, never wandered from the preacher. There was something pleasantly clandestine about the whole performance. Well, Betty mused, if it was not the peppermint business, it may have been that laugh. She had happened to look over where old Mr. Dinkum, with a blissful expression, sat singing, "Now wash me and I shall be whiter than snow." As his face and hands never failed unmistakably to advertise his coal business, the incongruity of it had made her hide her face in her handkerchief to conceal her laugh. Even this did not seem sufficient for a summons to the study at this unusual time. So finding nothing to keep her buoyant spirits weighed down, she said comfortably to herself, "A good conscience is a continual Christmas," and gave herself up to listening to the sermon and watching the people. After the doxology, however, she again began to question whether it might not be the pink peppermints or Mr. Dinkum. As several of the church members insisted on walking home with her mother, she had no opportunity to ask the burning question, and hurried ahead impatiently, determined to get to the study early and have the ordeal over. She reached there some time before her father. This was not the first occasion on which she had been summoned into the presence of those august theological books and stern line engravings of great and good men, and she had always left them weeping, to find in her mother's arms the mercy which tempers justice. However, tonight she was not wholly cast down, for she had the sustaining consciousness that at least she had gone through the evening service without one outward deviation from the best possible church deportment. It was not always thus. At her age, girls have eyes all around their heads, and things seem planned so that nothing ridiculous escapes them, and these eyes of hers had gotten her into many a scrape. But tonight she sat almost composedly in the dimly lighted study, and Dante's stern face looked less forbiddingly at her out of his untied nightcap, as she thought it was, and Martin Luther appeared quite recklessly fat and jovial. Thus does a good conscience reflect itself on all the surroundings. Waiting made Betty restless, however, and the familiar objects in the room soon lost their interest. "Why doesn't father come? What is it all about? Oh dear, won't those people ever go?" She slid out of her chair and went to the landing at the head of the stairs to see if they were still there. Yes, their tranquil voices floated up on the summer breeze to the impatient, sleepy child. "They will never go," she said half aloud, as she went back into the study and began to look at her father's books, pointing them out to herself and whispering the titles: Robertson's Sermons, History of the Reformation, Chateaubriand's Genius of Christianity, Commentary on the Holy Scriptures. They had never failed to interest her, but tonight she followed them with indifferent eyes until she came to her father's copy of Thomas à Kempis. At the sight of the worn cover her face grew bright, and she took it down lovingly and carried it to the table. Curling up in the chair, she was soon lost in it. She had lately read The Mill on the Floss, and it had awakened in her that instinct of emulation which is but the other side of sympathy. Maggie Tulliver was just her own age when she had found the old monk's book, which, with its note of self-renouncement, had marked the turning point in her life. Betty had felt she could never be happy again until she possessed a copy of the little old clumsy book, and she had begged her father to give her one for her birthday present. Maggie's later and great renunciation did not interest Betty, for she took out of books only the things that appealed to her girlish sympathies. Betty had waited a quarter of an hour or more, when her father entered with deliberate step. She jumped out of the chair and offered it to him, glad that the suspense was over at last. The door opened again, and to her delight her mother came in, and the two sat down together on the sofa. Dr. Baird coughed, as he always did before speaking. a thin, scholarly little cough. He was a very good man and deeply learned, but he was not intimately acquainted with childhood, and Betty had some fear mingled with her love for him. Without preliminaries, he said, "You have just passed your 14th birthday, Elizabeth, and your mother and I have had many long conversations about your future. It seems best that you should be educated so that you can teach in case you are deprived of my support." He paused, his thin, long fingers playing nervously with his gold pen holder. "You are aware," he continued, "that the educational facilities of Weston are meager, and that you have almost exhausted their resources, so we have decided to send you to boarding school." Again he paused and looked down reflectively, missing the radiant smile which for an unthinking instant flashed across his daughter's face. But the smile was immediately followed by a cloud, as the thought rushed in that this meant leaving home. "Oh, I can't go. I can't leave you and mother," she cried, putting her head on the shoulder of her mother, who gently smoothed the tangled locks. "You surprise me, Elizabeth," replied her father in his steady, even voice. "I believed you possessed of too much fortitude to give way to childish weakness. Your mother and I are doing this for your own best good." "Oh, I know you are," cried the child remorsefully, lifting her head and dabbing her eyes recklessly. "Only I can't be brave all at once. Mayn't I wait another year? But I do just love boarding schools." Her mother smiled and patted the hot little fist holding the crumpled handkerchief. "I am glad the idea is not wholly repugnant to you," remarked her father dryly. "Oh, it is not the boarding school, but I can't leave mother, and you, and home, and sobs hyphenated the words. Her mother drew her closer, saying softly, "I know my brave little daughter will not give way. It will be hard for your father and me, and you can help us bear it." I will, and she sat up determinedly. "Now I think we can pursue the matter with more calmness," remarked her father, as one who had retreated to a safe corner until the storm should pass, and then emerged into the sunshine. "As you know, we have always purposed sending you to the Pines, our cousin Elizabeth's school. A letter from her determines us to have you go next month. It is the part of wisdom to overcome our natural reluctance to separate." At these words Betty flew over to him, and throwing her arms around him, told him between excited hugs that she would be good and do exactly as he wished. "For you are the bestest father in the whole world," she said fervently. He smiled at her, patting and kissing her flushed cheek. "Now run back to your mother and get quiet, for I want to say a few words to you." He was less unbending and bookish than usual, and much of her awe vanished. "In the first place, daughter, you are going among girls who have been reared in the lap of luxury, and whose tastes and habits will greatly differ from yours. I want you to preserve your own commendable simplicity, nurtured as it has been by your mother. Wealth, expressed in fine clothes and extravagant expenditures, brings neither happiness nor peace." "Oh, you know, father, I don't care a thing about grand dresses for myself. I scorn them," and Betty gave a superior sniff. Her mother glanced at her husband with a pleased look, saying, "I am sure Elizabeth will not be dissatisfied, even if her belongings do not quite equal those of the other girls. She never thinks about such things." "I am glad to hear it," replied her father, smiling pleasantly. "I want my daughter to devote her thoughts to worthier subjects. Preserve your independence, but—" and he hesitated, for his daughter's characteristics were not very clear to him. "If there is a tendency in your nature, as I have sometimes thought, to be too impetuous and enthusiastic, you must try to overcome it, or you will find it difficult to accommodate yourself to the ordered life of the school. You should cultivate the habit of thinking twice before you speak." "I don't see how I could think twice before I speak, father, for the words fly out of my mouth before I know what they are to be," and Betty looked puzzled. Her parents laughed, and her mother remarked, That is a lesson you must learn gradually, dearie, for it does not come to you naturally as quoting does," and she smiled with a reproving shake of her head. "Why, that just pops out, too," said Betty. "But is the Pines a real palace, father?" she asked eagerly. "I'd love to live in one for a while, to see how it feels." "Oh, not a palace, child. I am sure Cousin Elizabeth's school, while no doubt a substantial and comfortable building, will be far from that. Do not have your expectations raised too high, my little enthusiast." "It's long after Elizabeth's bed hour," suggested her mother softly. "Oh, I'd love to sit up all night and talk about it," exclaimed Betty. "I fear there will not be much sleep for those bright eyes tonight," said Mrs. Baird. "Yes, it is time to say good night," said the father, and Betty kissed them both and ran to her room. End of chapter 1. Recording by Holly Jensen.